I let my mother-in-law think she was getting custody of my kids, until she realized I documented her drinking problem. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday, except my husband wasn't coming home from his business trip because he'd decided our 15-year marriage was apparently suffocating him. He called me at 7 in the morning while I was making breakfast for our two kids, ages 8 and 10, to tell me he was filing for divorce and wanted full custody because I was supposedly an unfit mother. The bacon was still sizzling in the pan when he hung up on me, and I just stood there staring at my phone like it might suddenly start making sense. My mother-in-law showed up at my door 3 hours later with a smug expression and a folder full of papers she claimed proved I was mentally unstable. She'd been collecting evidence for months, she said, taking pictures of dirty dishes in my sink, screenshots of my social media posts where I complained about being tired, and even a video of me crying in my car after a particularly rough day at work. She sat at my kitchen table sipping coffee like she owned the place, explaining how she'd been planning this whole thing with my husband for weeks. The woman had always hated me from the moment her precious son brought me home 20 years ago. She made comments about my cooking, my housekeeping, my parenting style, and basically everything I did wrong according to her standards. During family dinners, she'd make passive-aggressive remarks about how I dressed the kids or how I disciplined them, always with that fake sweet smile that made my skin crawl. She'd bring gifts for the children that were specifically things I'd already said no to, like sugary cereals or toys that made noise, just to undermine my authority. What she didn't know was that I'd been documenting her drinking problem for the past 2 years. It started when I noticed she always had a glass of wine at family gatherings, even at noon on Sundays. Then I realized the wine glasses were getting bigger and more frequent, and she was hiding bottles in her purse and car. I began taking photos and videos whenever she was drunk around my kids, which was happening more and more often. The first time I caught her drunk while babysitting was terrifying. I came home from grocery shopping to find her passed out on my couch, while my 8-year-old was trying to make lunch for herself and her brother. The house smelled like alcohol, and there were empty beer cans scattered around the living room. My daughter looked scared and confused, asking me why Grandma was sleeping so much and why she kept falling down earlier. I started a secret folder on my phone called Grocery Lists, but it was actually filled with evidence of her drinking. Photos of her stumbling at birthday parties, videos of her slurring her words while talking to the kids, screenshots of her drunk texts to me at 2 in the morning. I documented every single incident, including dates, times, and what my children witnessed during each episode. The custody battle started getting ugly fast, with my husband's lawyer painting me as an overwhelmed single mother who couldn't handle the responsibilities of raising 2 children. They brought up every small mistake I'd ever made, like the time I forgot to pick up my son from soccer practice because I was dealing with a work crisis, or when I let my daughter stay up late on a school night because she was scared after watching a movie. They made it sound like I was completely negligent and irresponsible. My mother-in-law was thriving during this whole process, already planning how she'd redecorate the kids' rooms in her house and talking about enrolling them in different schools. She'd call me multiple times a day to gloat about how much better off the children would be with her and her son. She even started buying furniture for their rooms and telling neighbors about how she was going to be raising her grandchildren because their mother was incompetent. The breakthrough came when she made a huge mistake during one of her drunk episodes. She called me at midnight, completely wasted, and left a voicemail that lasted almost 10 minutes. In it, she confessed to deliberately sabotaging my marriage by telling my husband lies about me cheating and being a terrible mother. She admitted to going through my personal belongings when she babysat, looking for anything she could use against me in court. But the real kicker was when she bragged about how she'd been drinking while watching my kids for months, and how they were too young to understand what was happening anyway. She laughed about how she'd sometimes have a few drinks before driving them to school or activities, saying it helped her deal with how difficult they could be. The whole voicemail was a goldmine of evidence that completely destroyed her credibility. I immediately saved the voicemail and had it professionally transcribed by a court reporter. Then I organized all my evidence into a comprehensive timeline that showed a clear pattern of alcohol abuse and endangerment of my children. I had photos of her drinking while babysitting, videos of her stumbling around my house, and documentation of at least 15 incidents where she was intoxicated while responsible for my kids. The day of the custody hearing, I walked into that courtroom with a thick folder of evidence that my lawyer had organized perfectly. My mother-in-law was sitting there looking confident and smug, probably thinking she'd already won. My husband kept glancing at me nervously, but I just smiled and waited for our turn to present our case. When my lawyer started presenting the evidence of her drinking problem, you could see the color drain from both their faces. The judge listened to the voicemail recording with a stern expression, and I watched my mother-in-law's confidence crumble as her own words played back in the courtroom. She tried to claim the voicemail was fake or taken out of context, but we had too much supporting evidence. The photos showing her drunk at family events were particularly damning, especially the ones where she was clearly intoxicated while holding or interacting with my children. The judge asked her directly about her alcohol consumption, and she tried to lie. But then we presented the receipts from the liquor store that showed she was buying bottles of wine and whiskey multiple times per week. My husband's lawyer tried to argue that her drinking didn't affect her ability to care for the children. But then we played the video of her stumbling around my kitchen while my kids were trying to make themselves dinner. The judge was clearly disgusted, especially when we showed the photo of her passed out on the couch while my 8-year-old was attempting to wake her up. The final nail in the coffin was when we presented evidence that she had been driving my children while intoxicated on multiple occasions. I had tracked her location through a family sharing app and cross-referenced it with photos I'd taken of empty bottles in her car. The judge immediately ordered a supervised visit schedule and required her to undergo alcohol evaluation before having any contact with my children. My husband's case completely fell apart after that. His lawyer tried to salvage something by arguing that I had been secretly recording family members without their consent. But the judge pointed out that I was protecting my children from a dangerous situation. The custody arrangement ended up being joint custody, with me having primary residence, which was actually better than what I'd hoped for originally. The look on my mother-in-law's face when she realized she'd been outsmarted was absolutely priceless. She'd spent months planning this elaborate scheme to take my children away from me, and instead ended up exposing herself as an alcoholic who endangered their safety. She tried to approach me after the hearing to apologize, but I just walked past her without saying a word. My husband was furious and accused me of being manipulative and vindictive, but I reminded him that I'd simply documented the truth about his mother's behavior. He claimed he never knew about her drinking problem, but I had text messages where he joked about his mom being a lightweight and needing to cut her off at family gatherings. He was just as complicit in putting our children at risk. The kids were initially confused about why they couldn't see grandma as much anymore, but I explained in age-appropriate terms that she needed to get help for a health problem. My daughter actually seemed relieved and admitted that she'd been scared when grandma would act weird and smell funny. My son said he didn't like when grandma would fall asleep during the day and not wake up when he needed help. The whole experience taught me to trust my instincts and document everything when something feels wrong. I'd been uncomfortable with my mother-in-law's drinking for years, but I never thought it would become such a crucial factor in protecting my children. If I hadn't been keeping records, she might have actually succeeded in taking custody and putting my kids in danger. Months later, I heard through mutual friends that she'd been court-ordered to attend treatment and hadn't been drinking for several weeks. Part of me hopes she gets the help she needs, but I'm not ready to trust her around my children again anytime soon. The supervised visits are awkward and tense, but at least I know my kids are safe. My ex-husband eventually admitted that his mother had been pressuring him to divorce me for years, filling his head with doubts about our marriage and my parenting abilities. He said he felt manipulated and guilty about how everything played out, but it was too late to fix the damage to our relationship. We're working on co-parenting effectively, but I'll never forget how quickly he was willing to believe the worst about me. The divorce was finalized 6 months later, and I got to keep the house and primary custody of the kids. My mother-in-law's drinking problem actually helped my case significantly, because it showed a pattern of poor judgment and instability in their family. The judge noted that my systematic documentation showed careful attention to my children's safety and well-being. Looking back, I realized that my mother-in-law's hatred of me was probably fueled by her own problems with alcohol and control. She needed someone to blame for her son's unhappiness and her own failures as a parent. I became the convenient scapegoat for everything wrong in their family. But in the end, her own actions exposed the truth about who was really the problem. The whole situation was exhausting and emotionally draining, but I'm proud of how I handled it. I protected my children without stooping to their level of manipulation and lies. I simply documented the truth and let it speak for itself in court. Sometimes the best revenge is just allowing people to reveal their true character without any help from you. My kids are doing well now, and we've built a stronger relationship without the constant stress of dealing with my ex-husband's family drama. We have our own traditions and routines that work for us, and I don't have to worry about anyone undermining my parenting decisions or putting my children at risk. The peace of mind is worth more than any custody battle victory.